Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Martia Umar. One of the worst feelings one could have is having a landlord who feels like he or she is high and mighty. I'm talking about a tenant right now. And sometimes when you feel that way, you're living in a house where the landlord feels high and mighty, life becomes sometimes excruciating for such a tenant. But one good thing is nobody is higher or mightier than the law. And that's why today we'll be talking about tenancy. We'll take a look at the overview of tenancy in Nigeria. Because if you know some of these things or all of these things, no landlord will feel mighty or higher than the mightier when they deal with you as a tenant. And who best to talk about this if not a legal practitioner who understands what the tenancy laws are, what is obtainable in the Federal Capital Territory and other states of the Federation. We're being joined by a legal practitioner, Barrister Farouk Yahya. All right, okay, I'm not going to say Barrister Farouk Yahya now. So it's going to be Farouk Yahya Esquire, Ibrahim Esquire.
Yes.
All right, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure to be here.
All right, so tenancy, that's a lot to talk about when we talk about tenancy in Nigeria. Some people don't understand what tenancy is all about. They don't even know the kind of tenant that they are. And that's why we keep having this hula-baloo from the tenants, the landlords, and, you know, when these things happen, you don't even know where to go because you don't even understand the situation that you are. But let's start with this question. What is tenancy?
Okay, thank you very much. Tenancy, let me put it in a layman's language.
Okay.
It's a transfer of possession from the landlord to the tenant. Complete physical transfer of possession. And this possession is exclusive. Once the tenant gets that possession, he becomes a mini landlord. It is only the landlord that has a better standing above him. Apart from the landlord or anybody claiming through the landlord, he can maintain an action for trespass against any other person. So tenancy generally means the actual transfer of exclusive possession from the landlord to a tenant.
So do we have different type of tenants or different type of tenancy in Nigeria?
Yes, we actually have.
Okay.
We have what we call tenancy at will.
Okay.
We have what we call periodic tenancy. And we have what we call statutory tenancy.
Okay.
That is tenancy at sufferance.
Okay, so when you call tenancy at will, statutory tenancy, you know, it's just a lot. Like you're using the legal terms, right?
Yes.
And to a layman, that's kind of complicated. Can you please break it down so we can understand what these types of tenancy are?
Yes, first, tenancy at will. This is the kind of tenancy where the landlord and the tenants agree. The landlord says, yes, I'm going to transfer possession to you. You can use this premises for the main time.
Okay.
No specific time when he or she, the tenant, would leave the...
Okay, let me get this straight. There's no specific time.
There's no specific time.
Okay, so it's just at will.
At will.
I can use this place as long as I want. That's if you're the tenant.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, periodic is, okay, I want to rent your apartment for a month, or 2 months, or 3 months, or half a year, or 1 year, or 2 years, or 3 years. So that's periodic tenancy.
Okay, periodic tenancy.
There's a time for the expiration of the tenancy.
Okay.
Then statutory tenancy, it's by creation of law.
Okay.
A tenant has exhausted his tenancy, but he's still in possession.
Oh, what does that even mean?
For example, I paid for a year, and my rent has expired, and I'm still occupying that apartment, and I have not yet renewed my rent.
Oh, wouldn't we say that we're trampling on the rights of the landlord right now?
Yes, but the law says he's a statutory tenant.
Okay.
Now,
Okay, that's a permission given by the court.
Yes, by the law that, yes, this person is a statutory tenant, so you have to follow the due procedure of ejecting him out of the apartment.
So what could bring about a tenant being a statutory tenant?
That is mostly when his or her rent has expired.
Okay.
Now, on the expiration of the tenancy year, and the tenant fails or defaults in renewing his or her tenancy, at that point he becomes a statutory tenant.
Is that something that you have to agree with the landlord in the beginning or after the rent has expired?
It happens after the rent has expired and the tenant has not paid the rent.
Right.
And the law, in a way, is protecting the tenant. Because if not for the fact that the law sees him as a tenant, the landlord can institute an action for trespass. You understand? But due to the fact that, okay, the law says this person came into this property due to an agreement, there was consent for him to. One thing or the other is making him not able to leave or renew. We shouldn't treat him as a trespasser. Let's give him the clothes of a tenant, but based on statute. Then the landlord still has the right to eject him following these laid down rules and procedure for ejecting a tenant.
That must be from the court.
Yes.
Okay, so now I understand why a lot of people think that, the law favors the tenant than the landlords. And in my own understanding, I'm thinking that, the tenants are weaker. I'm not saying they are weaker. I'm looking for a perfect word for this. Like, they do not have so much like the landlord. That's obviously why they do not have a house. So the law protects the weaker one from the ones who might feel high and mighty. I don't know if that analysis is correct, but you tell me.
The thing is, the narrative is changing.
Okay.
Before now, the tenants are at the mercy of the landlord.
Okay.
But the tide has changed.
Okay.
Drastically now.
Why?
A lot of times you see landlord running to the court to eject a tenant because that notion that yes, the law protects the tenants more than the landlord has gotten into the head of a lot of tenants, and they are trying to use the law at the disadvantage of the landlord. You see someone is in arrears of rent and he tells you that if you take me to court, the court will tell me to pay, and the court will give me 6 months grace to pay, stuff like that. And you ask yourself, where do you get this your own kind of law from? It is not stated in the law, but a lot of times some people, little knowledge of the law, maybe they go to court and they listen to when the judge was giving a ruling and they don't know the ratio of that judgment and like, oh, the law protects the tenant more than the landlord. Yes, truly, the law protects the tenant, but it also considers the standpoint of the landlord. So
that's why they say to know little is a big problem. When you want to really know the law, you need to study the law and know what it entails and what is enshrined in the Constitution. Because once you know that, the tenant has rights and then the landlord has rights too, and you feel the law protects the tenant more, which a lot of lawyers like you have argued now that the tides have changed, then it's a big problem. We just need to study the law the way it is. So now you're talking about the different types of tenancy that we have. You mentioned a tenant at will, the periodic tenant, and then the statutory tenant. Is this obtainable only in the FCT, or we have, all of this in different regions of Nigeria? Most
of the states of the Federation and the Federal Capital Territory, they have the Rent Recovery Law or Act.
Okay.
So a lot of times, all the states in general,
do they differ from region to region or from state to state?
The thing is, there's a lot of states in enacting the act, they will make little changes to it, but it's almost.
Oh, so what kind of changes are we talking about?
Now, it depends on the notices.
Okay. All right.
Like now, under the Act, it said once it's a yearly tenant, 6 months.
Okay, for ejection.
Yes.
Okay.
Now,
No, quit notice or ejection?
Quick notice.
Okay, quit notice. All right.
It's a 6 months. Then if the tenant at will, 1 week. So now you can get to a state and they might change the notices that should be given. They might change it to 3 months or thereabout. So that's the little changes. But generally,
okay, but in the FCT, a yearly tenant is entitled to 6 months quit notice.
Subject to the fact that they don't have an agreement.
Oh, I see. Oh, if there's an agreement, okay, that's where the tenancy agreement comes in.
Yes.
All right, we'll get to that. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag here because when you talk about a tenancy, landlord's right, tenant's right, it's just a lot. And if you don't take them step by step, just like you said, people will go to the court and say, I know my rights, and then you're saying something else. And
Definitely.
the lawyer is, or the judge is surprised. Where is this coming from?
Yes,
so let's take it step by step so everybody understands.
Okay.
So now, when we talk about the renewal of tenancy, we talk about injection, you talk about quit notice. What's the difference?
Now, quit notice is a way of bringing a tenancy to an end.
Okay.
Where you have an agreement and the tenant has a right of renewal. And maybe one issue or the other might come up and the landlord wants to make use of his house, or the tenant doesn't want to stay. Maybe there's a need for him to change location. You can serve a quit notice, and that, at the expiration of that notice, the tenancy comes to an end.
Okay, that's when it's applied. The quit notice is applied.
Yes, sir.
Okay. What about ejection?
Now, ejection is the removal of a tenant from an apartment. And this, you have to go through the court.
Does the court help in ejection?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so they are the ones who give the go-ahead for ejection.
Yes.
So a landlord cannot just wake up one morning and go eject a tenant.
The law frowns at self-help.
Okay.
The landlord should not, because, okay, I'm the owner of the house, and maybe the tenant has not paid for like 3 or 4 months. You just go and start removing the zinc, the roofing of the house, and making the house inhabitable. No, the law frowns at that. Such tenant can succeed in a claim for damages.
Okay.
But if you have such a tenant, the best way is you go to the court.
Okay.
The court would conduct the proceedings, and the court will eject. There are instances where you might serve the plaintiff on, and the summon on the defendant, that's the tenant, and he refused to come to court. The court will still go ahead. Once there is enough evidence to show that he was served, he is aware of the proceeding against him, the court can go ahead. Once the court sees merit in the landlord's case, the court will give a judgment, and by enforcement, he will be ejected out of the house.
You know, sometimes tenants, they can be funny.
Very
And
funny.
they can act in very mysterious ways, and you wonder what's going on. That's to be fair to the landlord.
Yes.
Some people will just lock up the house, maybe travel for a year. You haven't paid your rent. You're a tenant at will right now for a long period of time. And you know how the situation of the country is, the economic hardship. Most of these tenants, landlords rather, rely on this payment
Very true.
to earn a living.
Very true.
And then a tenant locks up the house for a very long time and travels. The court keeps serving quit notice. He's not aware. In that situation, what happens?
Now, the thing is, once his rent has expired and you serve the 1 week owner's intention to recover premises, at the expiration of that notice, you file the plaint before the court. A summons is issued. Due to the fact that the tenant is not around, you will definitely apply for substituted service, that the summons be pasted on the apartment or in a place where the tenant will be deemed to have knowledge of same. After that, the court goes into taking evidence. At the end of the case, once it's at the merit of the landlord, the court will do the needful. The properties of the tenant will be ejected out of that apartment and taken to the court for custody. So at any point in time where the tenant comes back, he will go to the court, approach the court on how to get his property. And if the landlord claimed for arrears of rent, because as of the time his property was still in that apartment, he is still deemed to be in possession, and his rent continues to run. So if it's maybe the rent has expired, then we refer to it as mercenary profit.
Okay.
He has not renewed or he's still in possession. So at that time, the court will look at the value of the house, not necessarily the rent value, the value of the house, and award mercenary profit in favor of the landlord.
And so who incurs all of this expenses now?
No, filing the suit is at the instance of the landlord. He could recover all the losses he incurred in the process of ejecting the tenants. So that's one of the reasons why a lot of times, even when matter goes to court, tenancy matter goes to court, a lot of times you see that the parties will apply for out-of-court settlement. Because, one, if the landlord succeeds, most times he will apply for the arrears of rent and the cost of instituting the action. And a lot of times, the court might award him, and maybe the tenant was complaining that he had no money, that was why he was unable to pay, and he's not having to pay for the cost of the litigation again. You see, it's better sometimes for parties to explore the out-of-court settlement.
All right. So if you're just joining us, this is Law and Order. And on this episode, we're discussing tenancy, taking a look at tenancy in Nigeria and what is obtainable in the FCT and, of course, other parts of the country. And that's our topic for today. We'll go for a quick break. Do stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the program. You're still watching Law and Order, and today we are talking about tenancy, taking a look at tenancy in Nigeria. And we've been having this discussion with Farouk Yahya Ibrahim Esquire, and we've been taking a look at a lot of things. If you have missed this, then you have to watch this again. And to watch this again, you can visit our YouTube page just by searching for Law and Order Trust Television. And it will, all of the episodes, and this episode in particular, will be displayed on your screen. All you have to do is click, and remember to subscribe. And so for more updates on Law and Order and other programs on the station, please follow us across all our social media platforms. So getting back to the studio, we still have our able barrister. I can't say able Esquire now, but, but thank you so much for being here. Before the break, we were talking about, some of the things that might be obtainable, when the tenant is not around. Maybe a tenant locked his apartment and the landlord needs to use the money, and then what the court needs to do at that point.
Yes.
But I know that, we did touch what is obtainable in other states. I mean, the tenancy laws obtainable in other states and the FCT. Just for emphasis sake, does it mean that, it's just the FCT and other states or region have the same laws governing tenancy, or we have, slight differences in each of the regions or each of the states?
The truth of it is, some of the states have the rent control law.
Okay.
These are laws that have been put in place to control the rent that landlords will demand from the tenants.
Okay.
Because, like it or not, a lot of times some landlords have been inhuman. They've used the opportunity of owning a house to extort tenants.
Okay.
Sometimes you rent a house without any meaningful modification to the apartment. The landlord comes and he's telling you that things are expensive in the market, that he wants to increase his rent. This is a house, maybe you're paying 100,000. The next thing you're saying, you have to pay 300,000, 400,000. What's the value that has been added for you to even pay for such amount for that same kind of building? So some states have, like Lagos, and some few states have enacted the rent control law. So it's like a template.
And that of FCT passed a second reading.
Yes.
And a lot of people had what to say about that. They had their reservations about the monthly rent. Some tenants said they wouldn't want to pay monthly. And some said, monthly will be so much. Some people said they would love to continue with the monthly rent, the yearly rent. And some people like, okay, the monthly rent is a welcome development. So it has passed the second reading. What happens after that?
After it has passed the second reading and final reading and it has been implemented, it's taken for assent, it becomes a law. But I've not gone through the bill itself. Well, I'm optimistic there will be provisions where the agreement of both parties will also have its way. If I have enough to pay for, I believe that bill will be like setting a minimum standard. Okay. If the tenant doesn't have more than a month, you shouldn't force. But if you're willing, if parties, because tenancy is more of a contract. It's an agreement between two parties. And we should, every other person should respect our agreement. So I believe the bill will just be setting the parameters for how the tenancy, the rent issues especially, would flow. Then parties, by the agreement, if I have the money to pay for a year, I should be allowed to pay.
So, if, like you said, it has passed second readings, and there are other things that has to be done. There has to be an assent before it becomes a law. But right now, there's no enforcement or whatsoever pertaining that bill. So, if I know in the provision of that bill, there are jail terms, there are fines to be paid by landlord, even up to the tune of 1 million naira if you go against what the bill. Do you see that happening in the Federal Capital Territory, where people have to pay monthly? And, individually, like your perception about this, do you think it's going to work?
The issue is it falls down generally on our ability to enforce our laws. That's one of the issues generally, not just with this new bill that is coming up. With the law generally, enforcement has always been an issue. A lot of times, when it comes to enforcement, people are very lackadaisical about enforcement. So, but if we get it right with the enforcement mechanism, it's obtainable. Okay.
So that's it for the tenancy, the overview. Now people understand what tenancy is all about. And, at what point do we say that the landlord would have it up to here? Like, what do you have to do to find yourself being injected? What's the limit for a tenant?
The thing is, it depends on, every case has its own peculiar facts and circumstances. But to me personally, with my little stint in the property sector, a lot of times is people always want to hinge on their rights. Now, there are properties I manage, and sometimes I meet one of the tenants. They explain things to me. I put myself in their shoes, and
things like what?
they're having some are having some financial issues, and they explain themselves to me, and I give them the grace they're asking for.
Okay.
But a lot of times, some would want to use that grace you've given them.
Misuse
that grace,
misplacement,
the
and
grace,
all of the
stuff like that.
Just
so, but
happens.
a lot of times is we are all human. Once we have that humanity in us, and we approach issues, there are enough apartments where some people are in arrears of a year, and the landlord is not disturbing the tenants, not because he or she doesn't need the money, the rent. It's the fact that the tenant has been so open to him. Maybe it's possible this is a tenant where before this incident, he has been paying his rent as of when due, he has been paying. And this year just having some issues. The landlord will like, okay, anytime you're free, anytime you have the money, pay. So most times it depends on the kind of relationship that exists between the tenants. There are some tenant-landlord relationship from the onset. It has been a tug of war. But
All
where
right.
you have a good relationship.
Due to time, we would like to continue this conversation, but because we do not have a time, we would like to call it a close here. But thank you so much.
It's my honor.
Farouk Ibrahim Yahya Esquire.
It's my honor
for being
to be.
on the show.
Thank you very
And that's
much.
how we call it a close. It's very important for you to know your rights, and the starting point is knowing what tenancy is, and that's what we've been able to deal with this episode of the program, Law and Order. But to keep up, where we discuss the rights of tenant and landlord, you have to keep a date with us next week, so you don't have a tenant or a landlord rather who feels high and mighty, and you don't even know your rights as a tenant. But don't forget that the landlord has your right to, which we'll be discussing on our next episode. Thank you so much for being a part of the program. My name is Martia Umar. Stay tuned, and bye for now.